There's some weird way in which these cable news hosts are so giddy and so enthused about saying Kyiv the
Yeah.
way Western Ukrainians
Take that,
pronounce it.
Putin. I'll order a
Kyiv.
chicken Kyiv.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Everyone does it now. It's like a fad. It's taken over everybody. I'm still a holdout because always thought it was Kiev. So why should I change it? Just because it fits in with a proxy war propaganda. But it's like a trend, and if you don't say it, you're on the outs. Like you're an outsider. Like you're not allowed on cable news if you pronounce Kyiv, Kiev.
Well, we saw the cancel culture in the Australian Open against Russia and Belarus, where Russian and Belarusian competitors had to actually compete without their flag appearing. They had to have basically a white flag of surrender appearing by their name. The female champion of the Australian Open wasn't even allowed to hold up her own country's flag. She was from Belarus. And, right here in Washington, Russian identity is being erased. There's always been a Russian diaspora here, and you talk to them, and not all of them support Putin. Many of them are anti-Putin, but this city is turned completely anti-Russian. There's a Russian restaurant here near DuPont Circle called Marivana, and they now on their menu, it says, enjoy the Ukrainian classic of borscht, because they have to erase Russia on their own menu.
Yeah.
And I spoke to several Russian people who are in the diaspora here in Washington who tell me that they've shown me exchanges on their Facebook pages where Ukrainians are just coming in, local Ukrainians, and telling them that they hope they get hit by HIMARS. They hope they all die. The Russia House, which is another Russian restaurant that sort of was completely apolitical, and it used to have a Russian flag in front of it. At the beginning of the Russiagate saga, it was repeatedly vandalized. Vandalized when there were these anti-Trump resistance marches, and just randomly vandalized. Now it looks to be completely closed. And there was a ABC News report about the Ukrainian efforts to purge their libraries of all Russian literature, Tolstoy, to purge any mention of Dostoevsky, Soviet history books. This is a pretty shocking clip.
Hi, I'm Patrick Reevell with ABC News, and we're here in Kyiv. We're at a paper recycling plant here. And the reason we're here is that we're watching hundreds of Russian books about to be pulped. You can see these men are chucking them into this chute, and then they will go up there and be pulped. There's really all types of books here. We've just seen him throw several volumes of Tolstoy, as well as there's books here about the Soviet victory in World War II. There's books about Soviet tanks. Basically, this is part of an initiative by a bookshop in the center of Kyiv, where people can voluntarily bring Russian books they no longer want in their homes to be recycled, and say that they're not simply destroying books, that they will be recycled and turned into something, in their words, more useful. But obviously, this is a pretty powerful symbol of Ukraine's rejection of Russian culture.
Let's hear that again.
In their words, more useful. But obviously, this is a pretty powerful symbol of Ukraine's rejection of Russian culture.
Yeah, like the powerful symbols of Germans' rejection of Jewish culture when they burned books that contained Jewish or Bolshevik influence. And that's exactly what's going on there. I don't know how anyone with any level of education that correspondent had could potentially smile on or praise a de facto book burning with cultural treasures. I mean, the work of Tolstoy, disgusting. And he was summoned there because they're so proud of what they're doing in destroying books and destroying literature, that they wanted a U.S. correspondent to broadcast this to the entire American public. And he calls it a pretty powerful symbol. That shows just how much our own culture has degenerated, that we would celebrate book burning and the destruction of literature. Of course, you start burning books, that is the precursor to burning people. And we see that happening. You're muted, Aaron.
Think about how much bigotry this proxy war has exposed about NATO states. So you have this like unhinged Russophobia that's been going on for a long time, especially during Russiagate. It really peaked. But then also think about, remember all those clips of those Western war correspondents early on in the war talking about how things like, like doing their live shots from Ukraine and saying things like, well, we expect this from the brown countries like Iraq and Afghanistan. But this is a civilized country of Europe, and these are people who look like us. There's all those clips like that. And then, of course, the most glaring example of bigotry is how tolerant all these people are of arming a neo-Nazi infused military and going from describing groups like Azov Battalion as being neo-Nazi to now calling them, like the New York Times does, celebrated. Whereas before, 8 years ago, they could accurately call Azov neo-Nazi. So all this shows an extreme hatred of Russia and Russian culture, an extreme contempt for global South countries that are the usual targets of wars that we wage, and just decrying the fact that now some white Europeans are the targets of a war, and the extreme tolerance of neo-Nazis if they're on the right side of the gun barrel, because we're arming Azov Battalion. So, I mean, it exposes just like how bigotry and racism is deeply embedded in NATO hegemony. And no one questions it.